I'm here at Dublin Castle. In the 16th century, this was the seat of English power in Ireland. At the time, they were met with resistance, particularly in Ulster, where they were opposed by two of the great Gaelic dynasties, the O'Neills of Tyrone and the O'Donnells of Tyrconnell. In 1592, Art O'Neill and his brother Henry, along with Red Hugh O'Donnell, were imprisoned here in the dungeons of the castle. Tonight, I'm taking part in the Art O'Neill Challenge, which recreates a journey that begins with their escape.
Well, the important thing about Red Hugh O'Donnell was that he was the heir apparent, you could say, to the great lordship of Tyrconnell in the northwest of Ireland. And why was he captured in the first place? When he was still only 15. And this was because his very powerful mother, the Ineen Dhu, was in the process of arranging a marriage between the O'Donnells and the O'Neills of Tyrone.
Well, they were imprisoned because it was part of the English move to conquer Ireland. Red Hugh, for example, was initially captured by an English captain, pretending that he was a wine merchant. In other words, they would keep them as a way of trying to keep the O'Donnells quiet. He was a hostage in that sense.
The Art O'Neill Challenge commemorates an escape from Dublin Castle in 1592 by Art O'Neill, his brother Henry, and Hugh O'Donnell of the Flight of the Earls fame and pre-battle Cahill. So it's all very kind of it's a turning point in Irish history. For the people here tonight, what they have to do is replicate the escape back in 1592 and get 53 kilometres to get from Dublin City Castle out to the wilds of Wicklow. And it's winter at night in Ireland and it's freezing cold. So that's what they've got ahead of them.
It's a freezing cold night in January, and I'm leaving Dublin Castle now to begin my journey to Glenmalure.
The first attempt was arranged by a kinsman of Red Hugh who came all the way down from Tyrconnell. The escape went very well at first. I mean, they jammed the drawbridge, they let themselves down by ropes. And of course, the fact that you have O'Donnells and O'Neills together escaping, this is very significant in uniting two families that had been at war with each other for centuries.
Red Hugh got as far as Castle Kevin in the Wicklow Mountains, which is the home of the O'Toole chieftains, Barnaby and Phelim O'Toole. But there seems to have been a bad storm and the Avonmore River flooded and Red Hugh couldn't. The plan was that he would escape into Glenmalure. I think the O'Tooles, for their own safety and for Red Hugh's safety, they handed Red Hugh back to Sir George Carew, who brought him back to Dublin Castle.
So the second time round was organised by Hugh O'Neill. Now, Hugh O'Neill, he was regarded as the legitimate Earl of Tyrone by Queen Elizabeth.
Dublin is a very different city today than it was in the 16th century. For one thing, it's much more easy to navigate. Street lighting wasn't introduced in Dublin until 1616, when the candlelight law required that every fifth house display a light to help travellers navigate the street by night.
When Red Hugh O'Donnell escapes, he has to get out of the town, out of the city wall. Now then he travels south. Once he crosses somewhere between, in a line between Tala and Carrick Mines, once he's over the Pale Ditch, he is in country that is, the expression has it, he's beyond the pale, okay? So he is in the wilds of the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains.
A rope had been supplied by an agent of Hugh O'Neill, and one of them fell near the end and damaged his foot, and so he had to hobble along afterwards. And then when Henry got lost, he headed off in his own direction, and the other two then headed up towards the mountains.
The escape was so well organised that Edward Hughes had arranged for horses that they were going to escape to Wicklow Mountains on horseback. But typically things went badly awry just on the night when the escape was planned. Red Hugh, Henry O'Neill, Arthur O'Neill, they seemed to escape through a privy into the castle moat.
Kind of like Shawshank Redemption, isn't it? So.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've left Dublin City behind me now, and I'm entering the much more demanding mountain section of the trek. I'm starting to appreciate the scale of this thing. That was a really tough trek up the hill to get here. Thankfully, however, although it's cold, the weather has stayed clear.
The Dublin Wicklow Mountains are not just wild in the end of the 16th century, they are wild right up into the end of the 18th century. There are very few roads. The road system as we know it now dates to after the 1798 rising. It was regarded, certainly by the English, as just no man's land, as just this great wilderness. And it is a great wilderness. It's still is a wilderness.
Well, they did have linen dress and tunics and that kind of thing, but the most important thing they had was the mantle. And this was fit dress for a rebel, according to Fynes Morrison, the secretary to Lord Mountjoy. It was dressed with honey, believe it or not, and this helped to keep out the rain for some reason. A particular way it was woven, so this was like carrying a great blanket with you.
Apparently when they came in for refreshments or some kind of a meal, they took off their jackets or whatever they were, their robes, and they went into the toilet area, and they escaped that way, and they left the robes behind them, which they should have taken. I mean, it wasn't well planned.
This is checkpoint 1. It's a rest station set up here by the mountain rescue team, and rest here is hard earned. Some of the climbs back on the mountain were very tough. They call it Red Hugh's kitchen, and of course the irony is that Red Hugh wouldn't have had any of these modern conveniences, and that includes the hiking boots that I have, and the thermal gear and the coat and the hat. The lads at the time travelled in tattered rags. On the way up, thought of this as an intrepid adventure that they undertook, and really it was nothing of the sort. It was really a grueling task.
It's the best soup I've ever had. I love soup.
Well, one of the things that he would have had to endure is a very harsh winter, because even though nowadays things are tough enough, and you can imagine how difficult it would be to cross the Wicklow Mountains in the middle of winter. When we're talking about 1592, we're talking about a period that's known as the Little Ice Age. And the Little Ice Age, I suppose, is basically the Elizabethan period, from the 1500s into the 1600s and even later. And it's why that if you read Dickens writing about 19th century England, he's always writing about the Thames freezing over. That was a very, what we think of as a harsh winter now would have been much colder, much more severe, much more snow. The likelihood is the conditions would be even more difficult than they are now.
I've come over the mountain, through the snow and into the morning from checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2, and while this has been extremely difficult for me, it was next to impossible for Art and Red Hugh. Totally exhausted and absolutely spent, they found themselves sitting on the mountainside, dying of exposure.
They got to a very difficult part of it, you know, and they came to a part where they actually stopped, and it was a part where they could descend at that time, and they found that very difficult because, you know, it was just almost impossible. So that's where they lay down, and the help, the guide then went off to find help, you know, because if they had attempted to get down that gully, they would never have made it, I think, you know.
So they probably did take shelter there, and they sent Edward Eustace down into Glenmalure to get help from the Wicklow chieftain Feach Mac Hugh O'Byrne. So Feach Mac Hugh O'Byrne sent some men with, the annals say, with food and beer back with Eustace up to find Red Hugh and Art O'Neill. So when the rescuers got up there, they were both in poor condition, but Red Hugh seems to have revived a bit when he was given some of the food and the beer, but Art O'Neill seems to have died of exposure, and he seems to be buried there up in the area that's called Arts. It used to be called Art's Grave, but it used to be called Art's Cross now.
Well done, right? Yeah. Good man, thank you. Yeah, well done, okay, you did right there, yeah.
Time to get you over there? Yeah. Lovely.
After 15 hours, I've reached Glenmalure. This extraordinary, exhausting escape is finally at an end. Although it was the demise of Ard O'Neill, it was to be the making of Red Hugh O'Donnell. He returned to Tyrconnell determined to expel the English from Ireland. The escape had unleashed a rebel.
This alliance between O'Neill and O'Donnell was absolutely rock solid throughout. The 9 Years' War would not have gone so well for the Gaelic Irish but for that. A port of particular importance during that whole 9 Years' War was Killybegs, to the west of Donegal town. This was regarded by the Spanish as the most suitable place for bringing in armaments, and they brought in a lot. That helped to sustain the rebellion for a very long time.
Red Hugh, because of his imprisonment, seems to have been determined he'd had enough of the English monarchy, and he wanted to transfer at least the overlordship of Tyrconnell to the King of Spain, and he had a good run. They were there until he was in Ireland until 1602, and right to the end, at the Battle of Kinsale, right to the end, he was still there fighting. The Battle of Kinsale was a tremendous victory for the English.
The flight took place then in 1607. It was a way of withdrawing into Europe to gain particularly Spanish help, you know. But at that time, by the time they got onto the continent, the new English king and the Spaniards were in conversation, and therefore there would be an agreement between the Spaniards, but that didn't suit the Irish.
That's where Red Hugh died, and he was buried in Valladolid, but the Franciscan monastery has long disappeared. I think might have been destroyed in Napoleonic times, you know.
It all comes to nothing, and he's gone at a very young age too, isn't he? Gone from Ireland at a young age.